Yo, what's up nerds? It's MTG Man, and welcome to another Deck to the Future, where I build a deck for a card that isn't even out yet. And today we're talking about Aatchik, I don't know how to say it, Emerald Radiant. So Aatchik is a 6-mana 3/3 Insect Druid. Casting cost, a little bit up there for a 3/3 is, what I first said when looking at the card. But when it enters, you create a 1/1 green insect creature token for each artifact and or creature in your graveyard. And then, whenever another insect you control dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and each opponent loses 1 life. Now, everybody's kind of seeing, okay, there's a bit of an Aristocrats payoff stapled onto your commander. So you can definitely do some Aristocrats things, plus it's giving you tokens to sacrifice for that kind of Aristocrat strategy. And while the decks I built kind of play into that, they kind of play into these, 2-card cute combos, is what I'm going to call them. It's like if you've ever watched the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, right? Weevil says, oh, I play DNA surgery, and I turn all of your monsters into insects. And then on his next turn, he plays Eradicating Aerosol or whatever, and destroys all of your insect monsters. It's that kind of 2-card cute shit that feels like it would have been in early Yu-Gi-Oh anime. And that's a strange way to build a deck, I know, but you'll see when I get into the deck list. So let's just get into it. So as you can see, Aatchik isn't even in the card database yet, so I'm just going to be going off this. This is my no-budget version, right? So this deck runs $754. And I see, wow, that's very expensive, right? Well, it's because of a couple factors. So let's just get into factor number 1. We're going to call this Cute Synergy number 2, which is Hermit Druid, where we can reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a basic land card, put that card into your hand, and all of the cards revealed this way into your graveyard. This deck plays 0 basic lands, right? So you tap Hermit Druid, you put your whole deck into your graveyard. With your whole deck in your graveyard, when you have your commander enter, you'll create, I think, 40. Don't quote me on that. I believe it's 40 total insects when it enters the battlefield, which is basically a 1-turn win, or basically win that turn if you have a sack outlet. Now, the problem with Hermit Druid is, well, if there's no cards in your library, you die. So we call this Cute Synergy number 2 because then we can flashback Krosan Reclamation from the graveyard to shuffle up to 2 cards from our graveyard back into our library, so then we have 2 more turns to basically play out and win. Moving into what we're going to call Cute Combo number 1. Cute Combo number 1 uses Endless Cockroaches, along with either Death Render or a Lauren. So when Endless Cockroaches dies, it's returned to our hand. And then we can play it for free with a Lauren, because any player may play a creature card with total casting cost 3 or less whenever they could play an instant. So basically, as long as we have both on the field, we can sacrifice cockroaches to whatever sack outlet, then we'll get a trigger from our commander, and each opponent will lose 1 life, and then Endless Cockroaches goes back to our hand, and we can replay it with a Lauren sacrificed again, and we do a little loop that way. Or Death Render, where whenever equipped creature is put into a graveyard from play, you may put a creature card from your hand into play and attach Death Render to it. So Endless Cockroaches enters the battlefield, we equip it with Death Render. Then we sacrifice it. Death Render will try and put a creature card from our hand onto the battlefield, so we put Endless Cockroaches, we sacrifice it, and we do this infinite time so we can get infinite triggers from our commanders. It's these cool little 2-card combos, or this one is completely unrelated to the commander, but uses Fumulus the Infestation. So 3 and a black for a 2/2 Flying Death Touch. Whenever a player sacrifices a non-token creature, create a 1/1 black insect creature token with flying. And we don't really care about the second ability. We can also win the game with it. But here's how this combo works. So let's just say we sacrifice a random creature to our Viscera Seer. That will then trigger Dictate of Erebos, where whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So in a 4-player game, each opponent's going to sacrifice 1 creature, which Fumulus will see as 3 players sacrificing a non-token creature, so we'll create 3 insects. Then we sacrifice one of our insects to the Viscera Seer, which the Dictate of Erebos will see, and then we'll get to just continue this combo over and over again until our opponent has sacrificed all of their creatures. And we're creating insects while we're doing this that we can sacrifice to either get a payoff from the commander, or just to have a huge board of insects. You can also do it with Grave Pact. I liked having both Dictate and Grave Pact because it gave you more options. The next cute combo is Zast Skittering Swarmlord and Verdant Succession. So whenever a green non-token creature is put into a graveyard from play, that creature's controller may search his or her library for a card with the same name as that creature and put it into play. If they do, they then shuffle their library, right? However, we have Zest, so whenever an insect you control dies, you put it on the bottom of its owner's library, then mill 2 cards. Using this combo, we could take something like just a normal green insect, like a... trying to find a good example. The deck only plays so many... Let's just take Caustic Caterpillar. So we sacrifice Caustic Caterpillar to one of our sacrifice outlets, then we get to put it on the bottom of our library, mill 2 cards, and then we get to search our library for a card with the same name, and since it's on the bottom of the library, we then just search, get Caustic Caterpillar back out, and we can do this infinite times as long as we have a sacrifice outlet, and while we're doing this infinite times, we'll be milling out our entire library, which will help our commander get stronger, and it'll just help out other synergies in the deck. Moving on to cute synergy number 3, Iridescent Hornbeetle. So Iridescent Hornbeetle has, at the beginning of your end step, create a 1/1 insect for each +1/+1 counter you put on creatures under your control this turn. So we take this, and then we look at the commander, and the commander says, whenever another insect you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Aatchik, and each opponent loses 1 life. So let's just say we had 5 insects die. So we put 5 +1/+1 counters on Aatchik, right? Then at the end of the turn, Iridescent Hornbeetle will see those 5 +1/+1 counters and create 5 more insects. That on our next turn, we can then sacrifice again, get 5 more triggers from Aatchik, which Iridescent Hornbeetle will see at end of turn again, and create 5 more insects. So it kind of just allows this sacrifice cycle for Aatchik and helps just keep the deck running smoothly. The last, like, quote-unquote cute synergy is, once you've milled everything over, you could take something like Grave Purge, and put any number of target creature cards from your graveyard on top of your library and then draw a card. And if you have Planeswalker out like Grist the Hunger Tide, you can activate its +1 ability, where you create an insect, then mill a card, and if an insect was milled this way, put a loyalty counter on Grist and repeat the process, right? So if we have all of our library in our graveyard, we can use Grave Purge to put, I think there's 21 insects? There's 20 insects. We put all 20 insects back on top, and then Grist will trigger over and over and over, and we'll get 21 insect tokens. And then, assuming that there's still some other card in our library, like let's say we did a setup of Hermit Druid, and we got back, we used Krosan Reclamation, and we put back Grave Purge and just something random. So there'll still be 1 card underneath, and we won't die immediately. But this will kind of just let Grist create a shit ton of tokens, and I thought it was like a cute combo. Plus, being able to -5 it to have each opponent lose life equal the number of creature cards in your graveyard can kind of burn for a whole bunch. And it's just a nice alternate option. Other cards the deck plays, we have Blight Beetle, because it's just kind of this, like, slow your opponent down card. Brain Maggot to kind of just pick away at your opponent's hand. Huskburster Swarm, because it'll probably only cost you 1 black mana for 6/6 Menace Death Touch, which is pretty solid. Mortician Beetle to benefit off of all the sacrifices. Virus Beetle because it just picks apart other players' hands. Moving into board wipes, we have Culling Ritual, which we can also just kind of use to remove all of our insect tokens and add a shit ton of mana in return. Could also kind of just lead to you winning the game. Swarmyard Massacre is just a board wipe for things that aren't insects, rats, spiders, or squirrels. I don't know how many insects, rats, spiders, or squirrels opponents are going to be playing, so it's kind of just a one-sided board wipe. Draw-wise, I count Realmwalker as draw because it'll just let us cast insects from the top of our library. So basically, our hand is just 1 card bigger because our hand now includes the top of our library, basically. Vanquisher's Banner, so that we get to draw a card whenever we play an insect. Return of the Wild Speaker. Your commander can get pretty big if you've done a lot of sacrificing, so being able to draw a shit ton is good. Or just being able to give all your non-human creatures +3/+3 can kind of win you the game sometimes. Knight's Whisper is just a 2-mana draw 2. Pact of the Serpent, you can choose Insect, and if you have a shit ton of tokens, Pact of the Serpent will draw you like 10, 20 cards. Sure, you're also losing life, but no pain, no gain. Like I said, this one's no budget, so Sylvan Library was like a given. It's just a nice way to keep your hand full. Voyager Staff, so you can flicker your commander. Mill-wise, we have like Aftermath Analyst, so that we can just mill 3 when it enters, and then sacrifice it later to get a whole bunch of lands back. Golgari Grave-Troll has a dredge of 6, which is just pretty powerful. Getting to mill 6 cards to bring it back to hand is good. Old Stickfingers only mills creatures, which we want creatures in the graveyard more than anything. So it just kind of made sense as a top end, plus a good way to mill. Mesmeric Orb, probably one of the best ways to mill out there. When it becomes untapped, or whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. So you'll mill like 5, 6, 7, 8, if not more at the beginning of every turn. And it's just going to fill up your graveyard super fast. Grapple with the Past is just a mill 3, and then you can return something you need back to your hand. Grisly Salvage lets you look at the top 5, put a creature or land from among them into your hand, and the rest in the graveyard. So it's helping you mill, but it's also keeping your hand full with things that you need. Same with Malevolent Rumble. You can either put a permanent from among the top 4 into your hand, or if you even if you do, you get to create an Eldrazi spawn that you can just sacrifice for free mana. Cemetery Tampering, just being able to mill 3 at the beginning of your turn is nice. Out of the Tomb is like exponential mill. Plus, being able to bring things back afterwards isn't terrible, especially with the number of creatures in the deck. This can keep you from decking out, and it's a strong piece for the deck. Nantuko Elder, I kind of just included because it's an insect that can ramp. Arcane Signet for ramp, Golgari Signet for ramp, Hedge Shredder, whenever you mill over lands, you'll get to keep them, so it's basically ramp. Soul Ring, Talisman of Resilience, Burgeoning. If you have no budget, you might as well include Burgeoning. It's pretty good. Dread Return, basically, if you have everything milled over with Hermit Druid, Dread Return can let you get something back from your graveyard that you need. This could help you get back Grist, because Grist technically counts as a 1/1 insect while in the graveyard. So you could Dread Return Grist if you wanted to do something like that. Plus, it's just another way to sacrifice insects. If you have no other way to sacrifice them, you could just flashback Dread Return if you need to sacrifice like 3 more. Caustic Caterpillar, just good removal. Haywire Mite, just better removal. Kraul Whipcracker destroys a token, which isn't always super important, but sometimes it's nice. Nullmage Advocate is probably one of my favorite politics cards. It's an insect that you can tap it, return 2 cards in an opponent's graveyard to his or her hand, and destroy an artifact or enchantment. So it's either, hey, I'm sorry I destroyed your Conjurer's Closet or whatever important piece you had on your board, get 2 cards back, or it's, hey, I am going to destroy whatever the most dangerous thing on board is. I'm going to give you back 2 kill spells, and you are then going to destroy more shit for me. You really have to, like, talk out what you're planning with it, which I really enjoy as part of a commander table. Beast Within is just general removal. Feed the Swarm is removal, and it's on flavor. I think Feeding the Swarm is a very insect-type thing. Into sack outlets, Devouring Swarm is here because, duh. I mean, it's an insect, and it's a sack outlet. It's kind of everything the deck wants. Viscera Seer, so you can kind of just scribe through your deck if you have infinite sacrifices off of, like, an Endless Cockroach. Altar of Dementia. Being able to mill through sacrifice is nice, too, because, again, the deck wants to have creatures in the graveyard, so if you get Endless Cockroach, like, looped or whatever, being able to mill through your deck with Altar of Dementia is going to be helpful. Phyrexian Altar, because just infinite mana is nice, fun fact. Moving into the token makers, we have a lot of these where when it's dealt damage, you create that many 1/1 insects. So I'm just going to, like, mention them as they go by, but that's what Broodhatch Nantuko is here for. You know, your opponent swings in with a 5/5, you block it with your 1/1, you create 5 insects, and that's 5 insects closer to winning the game. Same with Hornet Nest, except these insects have flying and death touch, so they're just better. Izoni Thousand Eyes creates insects when it enters the battlefield, plus it gives you a way to sacrifice other creatures to draw cards. Saber Ants, again, you just block something, create a bunch of insects. Scute Swarm is going to create insects over time, and then eventually it creates copies of itself, which are also insects. Very, very powerful. It's going to help you swarm your board. Springheart Nantuko, basically the same as Scute Swarm, except a little bit different, and you have to bestow one on a creature. Second Harvest to just copy up all the tokens. Doubling Season to double the tokens. There's only so many ways to make tokens in the deck, but then again, your commander also does it on ETB, so not super, super worried about it. Vampiric Tutor, Demonic Tutor, Imperial Seal. Again, if I have no budget, I'm including the high power tutors because this deck kind of wants to play to these 2-3 card combos with the commander, and you need to make sure you're able to get there. Moving into lands, we're playing a lot of the MDFCs, especially the ones where we can pay life to have them not enter tapped. Disciple of Freyalise can draw us a shit ton of cards if our commander's big. Malakir Rebirth can bring back our commander. Revitalizing Repass can protect our commander. Agadeem's Awakening is just a nice way to bring things back. Balagid Recovery can bring back things that we accidentally milled. Bridgeworks Battle is kind of just a good-ish fight spell. Decent removal. Turntimber Symbiosis, basically just here because it's MDFC. And then Blooming Marsh, Bajuka Bog for removal of graveyards. Boseiju to remove artifacts and enchantments. Cavern of Souls to just get your creatures, or your insects as uncounterable. City of Brass, Command Tower, Crypt of Agadeem, because there's going to be a good amount of creatures in your graveyard. Some of them are going to be black, so it could end up adding like 4 or 5 mana, depending on what stage of the game you're at. Darkboard Pathway, Deathcap Glade, Exotic Orchard, Gemstone Mine, Llanowar Waste, Mana Confluence, Nurturing Peatland, Overgrown Tomb, Secluded Courtyard, Swarm Yard to protect your commander, Takanuma because it's a good land and it mills, Pre-Tree City as just a way to ramp if you have a shit ton of insects, Tree of Tales, Twilight Mire, Unclaimed Territory, Underground Mortuary, Undergrowth Stadium, Vault of Whispers, and Viridescent Bog. No basic lands because of that whole Hermit Druid plan. So if we were to just play this as is, this has like half of every combo. Because we have half of the Zask right here. We have half of the Endless Cockroaches right here. And we have half of that that other insect right here. But we can't keep it because we need lands. I think we'd have to keep this. So Turntimber Symbiosis can enter tapped. Go to turn 2. We play Exotic Orchard. We play a Virus Beetle. Each opponent discards a card. We pass. At this point, we're fucked because we have no more lands. And it appears we're not getting any more lands. This deck plays, I think 34 lands? So this really should not be a problem. There we go. That's much better. Kind of. Command Tower, pass. Unclaimed Territory, Arcane Signet, pass. Gemstone Mine. I think we run out like a Broodhatch, and we run out Caustic Caterpillar, and then we pass. Okay. At this point, I think we play Phyrexian Altar just to have it on the battlefield. Talisman of Resilience. I mean, we could wait on Talisman and then run out our commander by sacrificing creatures, but I think it's probably better to play Talisman turn 5. Jesus. Golgari Signet. Sacrifice Caustic Caterpillar into Iridescent Hornbeetle. And it's also kind of hard to see because, like, Nantuko or Broodhatch Nantuko only really matters when the opponent has creatures to attack us with, and in this kind of demonstration, that really isn't an option. So that's definitely the more expensive of the two decks. I built a $100 budget one as well. It changes out it changes out all of the expensive cards. So, like, we play Duskshell Crawler to give our commander a trample if need be. As you can see, a lot of the combos are cut down. And let's be real here. We could probably cut out any of the combos and the deck would probably be better for it in general. I just thought it was a more interesting way to build the deck. It also plays like Unshakable Tail so that we can Surveil 1 every turn, which is just like an extra card milled if we don't need it. It plays Commune with the Gods and Gather the Pack as just a way to mill more efficiently. Witherbloom Command to like mill and also be removal. Songs of the Damned because we're going to have creatures in the graveyard, so we might as well add mana. Rampant Growth because it gets to play basic lands since there's no Hermit Druid. Insidious Roots so that our tokens can tap for, like, mana, which is a good thing. Carrion Feeder as just an extra sack outlet. It also has, like, Ant Queen is another way to make tokens, and Hornet Queen. Definitely more of that, like, Weevil Underwood flavor. It's also playing those, like, mill 2, and whenever you mill one of those cards, you get to create an insect tokens. And then for, like, tutor-wise, it plays Mausoleum Secrets and Traverse the Ulvenwald. Definitely more cut back, I guess, budget-wise at least. So, I mean, it'd probably be, like, Necroblossom Starl into a Caustic Caterpillar, pass. Broodhatch Nantuko, pass. Hornet Nest. So it kind of just wants to run out insects the first couple turns, and then once you get to your commander, you start working towards that combo or whatever else. Let's see. At this point, I think we play Viscera Seer and Altar of Dementia. Talisman of Resilience. I'm assuming we were probably creating Hornet tokens, or Flying Death Touch insect tokens. So, I mean, we could be sacrificing some of them to Altar of Dementia, and or just kind of waiting until we can play our commander. This deck's definitely hard to illustrate without, like, the rest of the battlefield. That being said, I think it's definitely an interesting deck. I think there's definitely a lot going on with this commander. And strangely, a lot of the other commanders I've been seeing, I don't think that much are going on with them. Like, if we look at either Drift right now, and, like, don't get super in on me, because maybe there are more exciting ones looking out, but, like, Vinwixt, Verbose Host, is a 2-mana 0/4, you have no max hand size, and if you would draw a card, draw 2 cards instead, if you have max speed. So in order to get max speed, you have to have 4 speed, and you only get speed, so you start at 1 when you play Vinwixt, and it increases once on each of your turns when an opponent loses life. So you have to hit your opponent for 3 turns in a row, and then by turn 5 you have double draws. That's if you can hit your opponent. I mean, blue has some, like, unblockable creatures, but it's not that impressive. Mendicant Core Guidelight. So its powers equal the number of artifacts you control, and then once you're at max speed, so you have to, again, you play Mendicant Core turn 2, and then by turn 5 you'll be at max speed if you hit your opponent every turn. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you can pay 1, and if you do, copy it. Definitely could be powerful, but again, you have to hit for 3 more turns in a row before you can even get that. It's like, it's okay, but it's not, like, blowing my socks off. Like, copying artifacts is good, but here's the thing with artifacts to me, right? You either have to be ramping a lot to get big and good ones, because there are definitely big and good artifacts, or you be cheating them out. And white and blue has more limited ways of cheating things out that I can think of, possibly. So it's like an up in the air kind of card. Winter Cursed Rioter. You know, artifacts you control have ward, pay 2 life. So it makes your artifacts harder to remove, and then you can exhaust it, which is an ability you can use only once. Now, I don't know if this is once per it being on the battlefield, or once per game. I don't know which this is. But you can pay 2 blue-black and tap him to exile X artifact cards from your graveyard, and each other non-artifact creature gets -X until end of turn. So if you're playing only artifact creatures, it's kind of like a one-sided board wipe. But again, if this is once per game, that's not super great. It could be impactful. It's nice having a board wipe in the command zone, but, like, again, you also have to exile X artifacts from your graveyard, and a lot of artifact decks don't. Well, blue does, but having things in the graveyard really isn't always the best for artifact decks, because they want, you know, artifacts to play. Because you play an artifact, you draw a card, and then you play another artifact, you draw a card. It's not even Storm, it's just a efficient kind of deck. So finding the deck that is okay with having artifacts in the graveyard, but also isn't doing, like, shit, what's that set? Because if you're playing a win con like Mirrodin Besieged, You want to have artifacts in your graveyard, sure, but you want them to stay there, and having to exile them with the commander is really going to hurt. Because things care about artifacts being in the graveyard, but they don't want them leaving. You want to have a whole bunch in your graveyard, or you want to, like exile them strategically with like Rex or something. I think that's its name. It's a dog from the Fallout set, where you exile an artifact, I think, and you put a brain counter on it or whatever, and it has the ability of all the brain countered artifacts. You want to do it more strategically, whereas Winter is kind of just removing a whole bunch of shit, and sure, it's a one-sided board wipe, but like, now your graveyard's empty. Loot the Pathfinder. Again, I don't know if the exhaust ability is once per game, once per turn. Sorry, not once per turn. Once per being on the battlefield. And I also don't know if you can activate each of these abilities once, or if it's once, like, at all. Because adding 3 mana for 1 isn't terrible. Drawing 3 cards isn't terrible. And dealing 3 damage isn't terrible. The fact you're, like, stuck using each of these once while it's on the battlefield, or maybe just 1 total, I don't know. It's kind of like middling. And I know, Double Strike, Vigilance, Haste isn't bad, but on a 5 mana 2/4, I'm kind of expecting more. Especially with like abilities like Double Strike, I kind of want it to be hitting, but it's not going to be hitting on this. Well, it could hit and then use its ability on main phase too, but like still, it's just I don't know. It doesn't seem very interesting to me. Far Fortune End Boss. So you start your engines. Whenever you attack, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And if a source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 1 instead. I know what you're saying. Okay, so everything deals 1 extra damage. That's pretty cool. Right, but he's only dealing 2 at that point, whenever you attack. Furthermore, he's only doing 2, and we're paying for a 4 mana 4/5, right? At that point, I'm paying for a 4 mana 5/4, and sure, Sulfim is non-combat damage, but it doubles it. It is double damage. It's not +1. And remember, okay, if you don't have other ways to start your engines, quote unquote, because before you start your engines, you have 0 speed. So you go turn 4, Far Fortune Boss, and then turn 5, you're at, if you attack on turn 4, then you'll be at 2 speed on turn 4, 3 speed on turn 5, 5 speed on turn 6. Sorry, 4 speed on turn 6. But still, it takes so much time to build up to max speed that it just doesn't feel worth it. Redshift is one I might actually consider because it looks somewhat interesting, but even then, it's not really doing anything that's special. It just seems like one of those decks where you have to get the most out of its ability. Caradora. So, I don't see myself building Caradora until we have all the cards on Mana Box, because building a Mount and Vehicle deck without all the new cards from the Mount and Vehicle set seems kind of annoying. Again, Lagrin is very similar, where it just kind of seems annoying without having all the new cards from the new set. Zahur Glory's Past. Again, with the start your engines, and then even when it's at max speed, you get whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token. It really doesn't have anything special going on, especially, it's not even a good sack outlet, because you can only activate it once each turn. So, it's a bad sack outlet with like a mediocre payoff at the end, but it's just nothing to write home about. And while there's like kind of interesting, I like Captain Howler, that might be a deck I build. Culloden kind of looks like fucking like Voltron for some reason, even though he's a dude. These are decks I might end up building, but if you noticed, a lot of these just haven't been super interesting, at least commander-wise, and that's why I decided to build a weird kind of combo-y, really bad insects. But yeah, this has been MTG Man, and I will see you in the next one, Peace.